Okay, then we can start, I think. We start with greeting everyone and saying welcome to this lecture that we will have today with Peter Kalmström, that we're all looking forward to a lot, which is about ethical veganism and argumentation. It is hosted today. Peter has been invited by Active Vegan Sweden and Animal Rebellion. And we're very happy to have you here. And we have been working with you before, and we're very happy for that reason to have you here again. Again, welcome everybody. Very happy to have you here. We're gonna start. I'm gonna take just 1 minute to present Animal Rebellion for you before we start listening to Peter, which is the star of the night, and tell you why I think that everybody here should be a part or a member of Animal Rebellion. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Just a minute. Click here. So, do you see my screen now? Yeah. Then I have to put it there. So, and what is Animal Rebellion and why should you be a part of it? Basically, anyone who is concerned about how the world looks today, how the climate is changing, and how our ecological systems are being affected, and maybe has a feeling or a concern why the big issue about agriculture and animal agriculture and the consumption of animal products is not being addressed in the public debate, even though we all know that it's a huge cause and also a huge possibility if we start shifting our society towards a plant-based society. And the Animal Rebellion is a global movement that is working with civil disobedience. We are trying to show our cities, our societies, that we really must listen to the science and start shifting our society to a plant-based such. We're doing it in different ways. This was a manifestation in Stockholm, which looks very dramatic, and it was supposed to be a bit dramatic to show how much the animal agriculture is causing damage. And we are doing different kinds of action. Sometimes they are elegant, sometimes they are more brave and bold, and sometimes they are more even political sometimes, just to highlight the issue of animal agriculture and the possibility that we have there. So if you are interested in these questions, Animal Rebellion is here in Stockholm, and we are trying to spread more in Sweden, and it's all over the world. And to follow us, this is, by the way, a picture from last week where we were outside the Swedish Parliament when they were opening. And if you're interested, well, this was a very dark picture I see now, or maybe it's just our screen here. We are on Facebook, we're on Instagram, Animal Rebellion Stockholm. We are on Facebook, Animal Rebellion Stockholm, and we have our global homepage, animalrebellion.org. Please have a look and have a read in it, and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you for that minute, or maybe it was 2 minutes. Now I'm very, very happy to hand over the screen and the scene and the word to Peter Kalmström and his presentation. I'm gonna stop sharing now. So, do you want to share the screen, Peter?
Yes, I do indeed want to do that.
Oh, we have some more people coming.
All right, everybody should be seeing my screen now. I hope. Let's see.
Yes, we see your screen.
Great. Just want to see. There we go. All right. So let's get started then. I'm going to talk about ethical veganism. Let me just do one more thing so I have everything set up the way I want it. Then I'm ready for my presentation. Great. So I'm going to talk for around an hour about ethical veganism and argumentation. So let's see. The focus is going to be ethics. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of health in there also, and a little bit of environment, but focusing 90% at least on the ethics. And yeah, my time is going to spend about an hour on this, as I said. There's going to be time afterwards for questions. About half an hour is what we have scheduled. It's a bit difficult in this Zoom environment to raise your hand and ask questions. So I think we'll hold the questions till the end. I think that works better. I'm gonna refrain from showing you scary reality. I'm gonna try to argue with you. If you're not vegan already, you should hopefully be vegan right after this lecture. I'm not gonna try to scare you. I'm gonna try to argue with you and present the case. And if you are already vegan, great. And then this might give you some new arguments to use when you're arguing with animal eaters. So I'm going to talk about some definitions, and then I'm going to show you some examples of animal cruelty and how we can argue against those things. So let's start by introducing myself a bit. My name is Peter Kalmström. I'm the editor-in-chief of Supervegobloggen. I'm very lucky. My whole family is vegan, including my grandmother, who went vegan when she was 99 years old. So I'm very lucky in that, because that is one of the really few things that are difficult in being vegan is, you know, the family situation. But I'm very lucky there. I'm also a writer. I've published lots of articles on veganism. I'm a member of a bunch of different organizations. I'm proud to say that I am a member of Animal Rebellion, Djurens Parti, the Swedish Animal Rights Party. I'm the president of the World Vegan Organization branch in Spain. It's a really big organization, really globally, mostly in Asia. But yeah, a member of a bunch of different organizations, and every chance I get, I go out on the streets and do street activism. But let's get into the essence of this speech then. Let's start by some definitions. What is veganism and what is carnism? Those are the two things that we're talking about here, of course. So let's start by veganism then. Well, veganism is the ethical standpoint of realizing that animals can and are victims. We want to implement a huge change in society. We fight for what is right. We're activists for what is right. And we're about 2% of the human population choose to be vegans and not eat animals. Our most important tool is that we boycott. We choose actively all the time not to pay for animal products or animal suffering in any way. The other side then, the other definition, the other side that we are in a way fighting against is carnism. It treats animals as objects. They have no feelings. Their suffering is not worth the time. It's the status quo, of course. Everybody, or, you know, this is how our society is built up, with a lot of exploitation with animals in the bottom. And the underlying philosophy here is might is right. I can do this to animals, therefore it is the right thing to do. That's, of course, how society is set up. About 98% is active carnists. And of course, their main thing is that they're sponsoring this. They're paying for it 3 times a day. So, and of course, they very seldom have a clear idea. This is how they imagine that the world would look if people stopped eating animals. There would be animals on the streets all the time. So let's look at some other definitions. Let's start with the word need. It's a very basic word, right? But it is very often used incorrectly. It is something that's essential. There's no other options. It's vital for our survivals. Want, on the other hand, is a totally different word. That's a luxury. You might want a golden toilet. You might want that dress. You want some fashion. You want to follow your tradition. It's about me. It's I am worth it, right? Most people claim to be animal lovers. Well, if we look closer at that, this is the definition of animals. As you see, when people think about animals, most likely they're not thinking about the whole spectrum of animals. And not all of those are cozy, of course. Not all of those are suitable as pets. And that's exactly what most people are. And what most people mean when they say that they're animal lovers. They are, in fact, pet lovers. That is why the US Senate could at the same time, the House actually, approve a bill to make animal cruelty a federal offense, and at the same time, just a few days apart, they made it officially legal to kill hibernating bears, and they did not see a contradiction between those two things. Animal cruelty is illegal, but you're allowed to kill hibernating bears. Same week that those two things happen. Of course, one of the arguments is that we are the fittest animal, survival of the fittest, right? But of course, we humans are not the strongest, we're not the fastest, we don't have the best claws, we don't have the best teeth. What we do have is collaboration. We're not quite on that level as the bees there, but we do collaborate rather well. And all of our civilizations, all of the basic civilizations that sprang up around the world are based around plants. The Indus Valley, they started growing barley. South America, the Maya, the Inca, they started growing corn. China and India was rice. Egypt was the wheat, and so on. So all of our civilization is really based on plants. Let's also define animal welfare. That is not what we're talking about. That is not what veganism is about. You can buy all kinds of animal products with approvals from lots of different organizations that say that this animal was killed in an acceptable way. There are lots of these brands, and you've seen them. One of those, down to the left, the Marine Stewardship, is the Swedish princess. She's talking about that one all the time, for example. But of course, all these approvals are based on money. It's a way to sell more products. It's not a way to actually save the animals. And veganism is not about finding the right way to do something wrong. It's not about finding the right size for a cage. Is it better to have a little bit bigger cage for the fox in the right picture? Yes. Maybe it's a little bit better, but it's not good. It's a little less bad. It's very important to throw in that distinction, to make that distinction clear. That we're not talking about making things less bad. We're talking about making things right. We're not talking about finding a way to do humane slaughter or better transports or less bad transports. We're not talking about a good way to separate mother and children. Well, isn't this a bit extreme there? Well, this is some protesters protesting against bullfighting. They look kind of extreme, don't they? And this is something you often heard, that vegans are militant, right? You can see this picture that if you rescue a dog, then you're a hero. If you rescue a cow, then you're a terrorist. But in fact, if you Google protest, if you Google vegan protest, you'll find people doing really friendly stuff. If you're Googling farmer protest, you'll find things like this, these videos here, where people burning a base of hail and spraying milk. That was outside of the EU Parliament just a few years ago. This happens all the time around the world. So the ones that are really militant are, of course, the farmers. What about self-righteous? Are we self-righteous vegans? And is veganism a religion? Well, it's not based on ancient beliefs. It's not based on animal sacrifice. It's not based on ignoring logic and all those things. So in fact, you see that carnism is very close to a religion. And I find it very useful for my own sake to look at carnism as a religion. Because if you think that you're going to argue with somebody about carnism and you're going to change their mind, most likely you're not. Because it is a religion, and it's the same thing. If you go up to a Hindu and start talking about, that Ganesh guy, maybe he wasn't really, he doesn't control all the wealth in the world, then you're not going to convince that Hindu with any rational arguments, because that it is a religion. People are going to hang on to that. What you can hope to achieve is to sow some seeds, to start them thinking about, is this really the right thing to do? And in fact, all religions of the world have this concept of the golden rule. Do unto others is the English version of it, or the Christian version of it. Treat others in the way that you want them to treat you. And that's the basic principle of how you should act towards others. in all religions. The only thing missing is that you should include the animals in that rule. Then all religions are vegan, but they, disregard the animals, or at least most of the animals. Otherwise, they all have that. All the religions can be read to support veganism, of course. Let's get back to the basics here. Animals can be victims. That is the most important thing of veganism, of course. And it's important that we acknowledge this, that we use the words. Animals are not slaughtered, they are murdered. They're innocent victims, and therefore we should use the word murder, of course, because they are innocent, right? They have an ethical worth. If I destroy somebody's desk, I am not causing harm to that desk, possibly to the owner of the desk, but when I'm hurting an animal, that animal can indeed suffer. They're not objects, of course. And this is the scariest slide I'm going to show now, the scariest slide of the whole presentation. For me, at least, the one I think about. This is the one that, really gets to me. This is the number of animals being killed every second. About 3,000 land animals every second, and a lot more sea animals, of course, are being killed. Because they're usually not even counted as individuals. They're counted by the kilo or even by the ton. Another very common argument that we hear is it's okay to eat animals if they had a natural life. They had a good life, right? They got to do their natural behaviors. They got to live in a good way. But in fact, what we're seeing, the animals that humans are eating, we're not eating adults, we're actually eating babies. They didn't have a good life. What they did have was, in possibly even a best case scenario, they had a good childhood. Then they were killed. But in fact, they didn't even have that. They had a horrible childhood and then we killed them. They never had a good life, most of them, of course. So, the victim's perspective, that is the essence of veganism, taking the victim's perspective, thinking about things from the victim's perspective. And a very important concept here is the consent. And that is the basis for all morality. It's okay to do something between two consenting adults. If two consenting adults are into something, it's okay. If one of them is not consenting, it's an aggression of some sort, right? It's the same thing with animals, of course. Since we humans do not have the capacity to understand if the animals are giving their consent or not, and of course we are capable of understanding that they're screaming in horror and are not giving their consent to be slaughtered or inseminated or all of the other things that we're doing to them. Those people that don't have legal power, such as babies or the challenge in some way, them we take extra care of. And of course, we have the moral obligation to do that for animals also. So should we respect them then? Should we respect the animal eaters? They demand that all the time, right? You must believe, I respect you being vegan, so why don't you respect me eating animals? Well, the very difference here is the actions. We need to look, we could possibly respect the human being, but we're talking about actions here. Eating animals is not an opinion. It is an action. Capturing animals is an action. Hunting is an action, and all of inseminating is an action. So we can look at it. You can respect possibly a smoker, but you don't respect the action of smoking. You can respect an alcoholic and feel bad for them, and so on. You can respect a burglar, but if you take the victim's perspective, you of course respect the victim, the person being burglared, a lot more. Another thing that we often talk about is the capabilities. What can animals do? Are they like us? Well, science is more and more coming to the conclusion that animals are very, very much like us in a lot of senses. One of those things is individuality. If you say, this is the way dogs are, You all know that's not true, because there are some dogs that are in one way and other dogs that are in a different ways. So each animal has individuality, and that goes through all animals. They can feel pain, of course. They can feel fear. They can feel joy. And of course, we know that. Even the animal industry is using that to market their own behaviors, that these animals are happy. Yes, of course, they're happy because they got to get out after 9-10 months or whatever inside a prison. Of course, they can feel joy. They can feel anticipation. They can feel love. They can feel curiosity. They feel sadness. Of course, we know all of these animals can feel sadness, just like us. One of the reasons we know that is we're actually testing drugs on animals, including drugs about depression. So we know that we're testing drugs to see if we can help depressed animals. There are actually rats and mice that have been bred to be constantly depressed, and then you give them drugs to try to stop that depression. So of course they have the same feeling when it's useful for us. We all know that. It's scientifically proven. How about intelligence then? Are they as smart as we are? Well, there's a really good book about animal intelligence called Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? And in fact, we're not. The more we learn about animals, we know that they are self-aware, they can recognize themselves, they can solve problems, of course, they have memory skills, they can plan for the future, they can recognize each other and human beings, of course. They call themselves names and they call each other names, they recognize each other, so on, so they have individuality. They participate in social and physical structures. They communicate. But of course, the most important thing, can they feel pain? That's, of course, the main divider here. Are we doing something bad when we're eating them, when we're capturing them, when we're inseminating them? Yes, of course they can feel pain in the same way all other animals do. It's very fundamental. They have the same receptors in their body as we do. They have the same kind of nervous system. They have the same instinct to pull away from something that is not pleasant. Even worms do that, and they're very, very simple creatures. They react to opioids in the same way that we do, and their bodies react. You can measure that an animal is feeling pain by measuring the endorphins in the body. So it's the same kind of thing as humans. They react in the same way. They experience pain in the same way. So that's the end of the definitions of veganism and the main principles. Now I'm going to talk about a few examples of things that we do to animals and why those particular things are wrong, and just some fact around those that will help you when you argue about those. And again, I'm not going to go in and show too many scary pictures. I'm just going to talk about the principle. So let's start easy. Let's talk about eating dogs. That's an easy one, right? Almost nobody in Sweden thinks that eating dogs is okay, except for when we're talking to vegans, of course. To be consistent, some people say that it's okay to eat dogs also. But as you see, there are about 25 million dogs eaten annually, and most of that is in Asia. The Yulin festival is very famous, of course. South Korea also eat a lot of dogs. And there you see a protest where South Koreans are defending their right, their individual right to eat their delicacy, the dogs. Vietnam also, Nigeria. Of course, dogs, as we know, they can suffer, and they do suffer. They do not enjoy being transported. They do not enjoy being slaughtered. They do not enjoy being separated from their family. And here, it's very easy to start talking about, when you're talking about prohibition, outlawing eating animals. Should eating dogs be outlawed? It is already outlawed in Sweden, right? And in most of Europe. So should it be outlawed all over the world? Of course. And it's the same thing with all animals, of course. It's the same moral principle, right? Yeah. Bullfighting then is another easy example. About 7,000 bulls every year are killed. in a bullfighting. Not only bullfighting, there are a lot of different types of using bulls for entertainment. This is a tradition. It's sanctified and even blessed. The actual church comes out and does the sign of the cross in front and before every bullfight. And I've actually been in an argument with a cardinal who was defending bullfighting outside the bullfighting ring. He was screaming at me and other protesters, "Go home, let this Spanish tradition." And he said to me, of course, as a foreigner, he said to me, "Go get out of here. You don't know anything about our Spanish traditions." They argue for open landscapes. They think if we don't do bullfighting, we will not have open landscapes in the northern parts of Spain. There's no other way, right? We have to torture bulls. So it's the same kind of, do you recognize that, anybody who's from Sweden? Open landscapes, heard that one, right? They had a good life. It's also a very common argument. And there's all, that's a personal choice. If you don't like bullfighting, well, don't go to the bullfight. Don't bother me. Of course, it's the same argument. You recognize these things, right? And the most important thing that they're doing is, of course, subsidizing. Buying those tickets. And of course, we vegans don't do that. But in fact, we are doing it. We're paying for these bullfights also. No matter how vegan you are, if you're paying EU taxes, you are doing it. About 100 million euros a year is given in direct subsidies to bullfighting every year. Directly to bullfighting. That's, of course, just a small drop if we get into talking economics, but that's another lecture. Let's talk about ethics. Let's continue talking about trophy hunting. Well, the trophy hunters often claim that trophy hunting is a way to conserve. They claim that the money they spend on hunting a lion, for example, benefits the society, benefits the conservation efforts in that country. It is not, of course. If you have $50,000 to spend on killing a lion, there are lots of better ways to doing that. Airline transports is one way to protest against this, of course, because all these trophy hunters, because they want the trophy, they have to transport it home. There are a lot of airlines that don't do that anymore. We should, of course, do everything that we can to stop the others from doing it also. And of course, souvenirs is what they're after. Transports, let's talk about transports, next thing. 28 hours is the legal limit within EU. And of course, this is one of those really, really scary transport ships. There are lots of them going around the world. And the 28 hours, that's inside the EU. Across borders, across EU borders, it's even longer, of course. There's no rules. There's no international laws at all for transports. Of course, there's no seat belts and there's no eco transport. I mean, I say, I only eat eco meat. How is that transported? Do you think there's an eco transport transporting your meat 8 hours inside Sweden? Of course it's not. Seat belts, of course, there are no seat belts inside these transports. Of course, there's no air conditioning, and the animals that can die inside a car can, of course, die inside a transport, and they do suffer. You've probably heard this story that a woman who gave them water to pigs in Toronto was actually prosecuted for that. She was acquitted, but anyhow. And of course, excrement, they're scared. If you haven't been outside a slaughterhouse at one of the Save movements protest, please go to experience it at least once and feel the smells, because that's one of the things that really gets to you, gets into your heart and gets into your brain, and you can feel how scared and horrible that transport is. And of course, they're feeling the fear in that transport. And those ships are one of the worst examples. Just recently, this happened outside of Romania. A cargo ship was capsized, and it had 14,000 sheep in it. And this happens very often, of course. This is a transport ship from Australia, and of course Australia is one of the major producers of sheep and wool, and they often transport those to the Middle East after. All right, let's talk about the next thing, anesthesia then. And that's of course something that we pride ourselves in, that in the Western society we are humane. we anesthetize animals before we're killing them. And so we're very much better than the halal and the kosher slaughterhouses where they do not anesthetize. So instead we use gas, and of course that is extremely painful. We use bullets, we use electrocutions, and of course there's no echo slaughter, and of course the movement inside the slaughterhouse is another horrible, painful and horrible experience for the animals. Next example is down. Geese are of course very social animals, they're smart animals, they're cute, and from them we take their feathers. We rip literally their feathers off and to make pillows and jackets. Another example is circus animals. One of the major problems with that is the training. Of course, you need to train an animal very hard to make it to do all these things that we see, the confinement and the transports again. And this is of course legal in Sweden still, and in lots of countries around the world. The best thing we should do with that is of course to boycott it and will not pay for it. Next thing that I want to talk about is fur. In Sweden we have the example of minks, which is still being produced. I think it's around 1 million still of minks being killed every year. Foxes, wolves, coyotes, rats. The industry is often claiming that this is sustainable, so they're taking the environmental path here. If you dig just a little bit deeper, you'll find that no, of course not, fur is not sustainable. There are lots of chemicals, lots of problems with fur also from that perspective. So that's just horrible. But from an ethical perspective, of course, it's totally wrong to kill about 40 billion animals are being used for fur annually. Of course, there's a lot of waste in that also. And it's a very common misconception that fur is cheap. Sorry, fur is expensive. So if you see something that is cheap, then it's most likely fake. But in fact, this industry is quite large, so it's quite cheap to buy fur. Not, of course, that kind of thing that we're seeing there. Maybe that's, of course, expensive. But those little balls that you see on top of your head, those kind of things are really cheap. And most often they are from real animals. Of course, there's a lot of chemicals used there also. Let's talk about the next thing here. That's pig body parts, something that is very, very popular in the world. In Sweden, we're killing about, what is it now? I forgot the number. I have some other numbers coming. Anyhow, they're very social, they're very intelligent, they play games. They actually build nests. Just like birds, they build nests. They have a wide range of natural behaviors, including rooting, looking for food, but instead they are indoors their entire life. And a big percentage of them actually die out. This is a commercial movie for a tool that makes it easier to pick up the dead pigs inside the barn. About 20% of the pigs die out, before they go to slaughter. So that's a commercial for that. In Spain, which is one of the countries I know best, they have 50 million pigs here. That's about the same number of pigs as there are humans. They're of course always indoors. A pig also eats 7,000 to 8,000 calories a day. It's a lot of calories, of course. They grow very, very fast, and they die very, very young. They also produce a lot of shit. And that is, of course, a huge environmental problem. And they use a lot of water. It takes huge amounts of water. Antibiotics, of course, we're using a lot of antibiotics to keep these animals alive until they're slaughtered. And of course, the soy imports is another issue. And of course, this is the same in every country. This is pictures from Sweden. This happened just in Ireland the other day. 2,000 pigs were burned in a maternity ward. So you see these cages here in the picture where these mothers were crammed together, giving birth to babies, and then there was a fire, so 2,000 of them were burned to death just a few days ago. Let's talk about leather. About 1 billion animals yearly are killed for leather. China and India are the big producers. Often you don't really see what animal did your leather come from. It's very common that the leather comes from pigs, sheep, even dogs and cats. Let's talk about milk then. So of course, the cows are the international symbol of compassion. And always when you're arguing with Swedes, you come into the cows. Göran Persson, previous minister of Sweden, or prime minister of Sweden, he is now a cow farmer, and he's saying that the cows did not cause the environmental crisis. We should not shoot the cows. So he's trying to portray us, the vegans, as if we're trying to attack the cows, which is of course ludicrous. But it's a rather effective tactics, and Trump is using exactly the same tactics, saying that the Democrats, they're trying to kill your cows. So yeah, that's a scary thing. Milk is of course a horrible product. There's a really good movie called Dairy is Scary. If you haven't seen that, you definitely should. It's of course very connected to the meat industry. Vill, the young bulls are killed rather young, while the cows of course get to live a few years. Then there's the emotional angst of separation. The whole process starts in the beginning when you masturbate a bull. So the whole process of creating milk is horrible. The more you think about it, the more horrible it gets. And after a few years, the cows get spent. About 70% of cows get mastitis yearly, and they live 4 to 6 years. And there's a lot of propaganda and a lot of marketing around milk, of course. You've all seen that. Yeah, and the cow body parts themselves are, of course, marketed as, you know, real male food, really macho food and all that. Yeah. Goats are another animal that's being exploited for milk. They're very energetic, they're friendly, they're playful, very, you know, nice individuals, really, right? And what we're doing then with them, we're of course taking their body fluids and yeah, misusing it. Chickens is another one. This is a more commercial for chickens, free-range chickens, and see how nice it is and so on. They're often marketing as lean and clean proteins. This is again a chicken commercial. I mean, they mustn't have really a clear picture of how people see their reality if they can market this as an optimal circumstances. And this is how they're representing it themselves. And they're marketing this as happy farms and so on. But of course, they're indoors their entire lives. It can have up to 40,000 chickens in a barn or hens. And here's an example that happened just a few, well, in December last year, actually. 200,000 chickens were stored or imprisoned indoors, and they were found dead after suffocating. And that's of course because the whole system is locked in. It's airtight, so they died when the power went out. Moving on to eggs then and chicken. So egg production is of course the reproductive cycle of the hen that has been pushed to its limit. So it's as all egg-laying animals, the usual cycle is somewhere around once a month, right? But hens have been pushed so that they now produce about 260 or even more per year. They are of course not machines, and it's like having a constant period. And of course that is horrible. It also comes out of a hole called cloaca. And one thing that you really should think about is the cockerel, the baby male chicken, which is of course being killed because that chicken is never gonna lay any eggs. Moving on to non-trophy hunting. So of course, when we're talking about hunting, a very common thing to talk about in Sweden is the wolves, that we want to kill all of the wolves. We want to have the free range cows, right? We always get back to that argument. But wild horses, tauros, vicents, those other free range grazers are very seldom mentioned, otherwise, except as for hunting. And as you see, all these animals, or all these wild animals, are in fact in connection, in a circle of life. And that's often what hunters claim also, that I'm just taking out some of the animals, it's a circle of life. But of course it's not, because when you kill in this way that we're still doing, that we have been doing for more than 100,000 years, we've been killing and trying to take out just a little bit, the result is that we have lost about 70% of all the live animals on the planet since 1970. So the first things we kill is often the predators. And we're claiming to do this because if we didn't do it, we would lose control of the whole ecosystem. And we also often claim that they would suffer if we didn't kill them. We always get into the discussion about the victims, so we need to kill the victims of traffic accidents and stuff like that. Coming back to the argument about circle of life. When a human takes out an elk, for example, right now in Sweden we have the big elk hunt going on, right? When we take those elks out, of course, all the other animals who need to eat carrion, who need to eat dead animals, they don't get it. They don't get any dead animals. So we have lots of maggots, we have birds, we have insects and bacteria that benefit from carrion. And if an animal dies in the wild, it benefits literally thousands of animals. If a human being takes an animal out of the forest, it benefits nobody. It actually produces a lot of pollution, of course. So we are not part of the circle of life. Animals are part of the circle of life. We've taken ourselves out of that circle of life thousands of years ago. Moving on to animal testing. About 100 million animals are used in animal testing every year. 2% of all drugs that pass animal testing are then not approved for human use. So in fact, it's often a fail. And of course, they cannot reproduce the result that they're getting on animals on humans. So it's all a waste. So it's diverting really good science efforts that could have been to actually solve the problem. And why is this okay then? Well, the argument is often that it's okay to experiment on animals because they're not like us, right? You've heard that one, right? They're not like us, they're different from us. But why is it scientifically valid to use animals for testing? Well, because they are like us. Well, the contradiction there is rather stark, right? Moving on to wool. Sheep are, of course, funny, they're adorable, they're lively. But what we're doing with them is actually taking their hair and making clothes out of our animal hair. And of course, these animals are damaged. They are bred. Just like the hens are bred to give too many eggs, the sheep are bred to give too much hair. And of course, the major producer of sheep and wool is Australia. And of course, we know that Australia is a hot and dry place. Could you imagine a worse place to have too much hair? Of course not. It's horrible. 4 million animals are live exported from Australia every year. Remember that pictures from the live export? It's 4 million individuals annually. And of course, insemination. All of these things, I could have shown insemination videos. This is again a commercial of a sheep being inseminated. And this looks horrible, of course, but imagine how it would look. This is again a commercial. Look how good, look how effective, look how humane this is. This is the commercial from the company that's making this product. Imagine how you would inseminate, or to use a more correct word, how you would rape a sheep without it. It would be horrible, of course. And of course, that's how they're doing it. Most people don't have this fancy machine. They're raping in some other ways, right? China produced a huge amount of wool also, and one of the things that they're doing there is the Angora rabbits. About 90% of that comes from China, and that's done by hand ripping. And this looks horrible. I apologize for that. Another thing that I didn't want to not mention, but I didn't want to show it either, is mulesing. If you don't know what that is, and you are not scared to know, then look it up. It's a horrible thing where you cut part of their butt off to isolate the area where insects are. It's an absolutely horrible thing. Moving on to zoos then. Now we're coming into a little bit more difficult thing. Most people that are not defending eating dogs and are not defending eating, going to a bullfight, they will still defend the zoos. And many people get into arguments about things. They think they want to defend this. And of course, this is what it's about, seeing your animal friends in prison. One thing you might want to remember here is that there are more than 10,000 zoos in the world. 10,000 zoos. That's a lot of zoos. And of course, most of them are horrible for the animals. Some of them might be slightly less bad, and they're all going to claim that they're slightly less bad, of course. But there are 10,000 of them. And of course, it's not natural. They're not beneficial to the animals. They're all claiming that we're doing this for science and so on. They're not saving animals. And we can see, of course, the behavior of these animals, that they're trying to escape, they're trying to get out there, they're not happy in captivity, of course. There are lots and lots of examples that I can show here. One of them is this wild fire at a park in Ohio. And here you see the giraffes running around in the fire. And of course, they should not be there. This is prisons we're talking about. Moving on, insects then. Insects, well, how about them? Is it okay to exploit insects? They are animals, but they're very small, right? Well, they are sentient. They have a huge amount of intelligence. They have the same kind of a nervous system that we do. They have a spinal cord. They have segmental nerves and all those things. Also, they are extremely valuable for our food supply. They're also very important for the world. We need them, definitely, very much. The number of insects in the world have decreased by 76% since 1989, according to a study in Germany. So insects are dying out really fast. So we definitely need to stop exploiting them. One of the ways we're exploiting insects is honey, of course. Humans eat their food storage, the honey, and of course, something that I could have said over and over again on each and every one of these examples, we humans do not need sugar vomited by bees. We don't need that. We don't need sugar, but they do. Animals do. The bees and their bee larvae, they need this. And as I said, the bees are declining really fast, and they're very important for pollination. 70% of all types of food rely on pollination from bees. And this is, of course, a huge threat. And we need to look at this from two ways, because this is something that the bee farmers are actually using as an argument. You should eat more honey because we're keeping the bees alive. Is that true? Does that make sense? Of course not. It does not make sense. We need to keep the wild bees. Bees in captivity is not the problem. They are doing rather well. They're doing okay. But the wild bees, those are the ones that are going down really, really fast. And we cannot rely on just bees in captivity for our future food production. So for our own sake and for the sake of the bees, of course, we should not be eating honey. So yeah, they're declining. The wild bees are declining really quick. And of course, their intelligence and what we do to them is keep them captured. We're inseminating. We've actually figured out a way to rape a bee. We cut out off the wings of the queen bee. And of course, they feel pain in the same way. Another example is silk production. We take the cocoon of the silkworm. They're boiled alive. Of course, you cannot give anesthesia to these, so you boil them alive and then you take them. About 160,000 metric tons of silk is produced every year. And to produce 1 kilo of silk, you have to kill 4,000 silkworms. So that comes out to about 700 billion individuals. And of course, we don't need that. Again, the ongoing theme, we don't need silk. We might want silk, but we don't need silk. And it stands for less than 0.2 of the fabric market of the world. How about clams then? Clams and other bivalves. Can we eat them? Well, they actually do not have a nervous system, right? They can hardly move. They can wiggle about a bit. But they have something called nerve ganglia, which is a pre-brain. And the protein of bivalves are, of course, animal protein. So all the health problems that we were talking about when we were talking about the health of eating animal products, they apply to bivalves and clams also. So that's another reason. And also, that ganglia will, of course, allow them to feel pain. They do react to pain in the same way that all other animals do. And when people say, at least I can eat them, right? At least I can eat the clams. Well, what they're really saying is, at least I can kill something. That's what we're talking about if we're taking the animal's perspective and the victim's perspective. All right, moving on to vegan babies then. All right, now it's getting a bit difficult here. We see this all the time, right? Should we force our babies to eat their vegetables? We see this in the news all the time, that parents, bad parents, are forcing their animals to just eat apple juice or drink apple juice and not much else. So this happens, and of course it comes in the news all the time to prove that veganism is a horrible idea. But of course, the problem is not the vegan diet. Babies can, of course, eat vegan food. They don't have a need for anything else. The problem in most cases is poverty, bad education, all kinds of bad things. About 1 million children every year die of malnutrition. A very, very small part of those are vegan, of course. Human children do not need anything. There's no need. There's no magic bullet in animal products. All the nutrients that we need are, of course, in vegetables. There are lots of deficiencies. A lot of children have deficiencies of many different kinds, vitamin D or vitamin B, for example. 40% of US citizens have vitamin B12 deficiency, but that is not because they are vegan, of course not. How about pet animals then? Should we keep animals with ourselves in captivity? Well, we should, of course, look at the alternatives here. What are the alternatives? Should we leave them to be stray dogs and run around on the street? There are about 200 million stray dogs. So should we release all of our dogs and pets or cats? Should we release them into the streets? Of course not. There's no wildlife for dogs that work, regretfully. I wish there was. I would be happy to release the dog that I adopted, because I know he's happiest when he's playing with other dogs and when he's free, but he would not be safe and he would not be alive today as a stray dog, which he was before I adopted him. There are about 100 million feral cats, and of course they create huge problems because they are predators. They hunt, and they hunt rather well. So they hunt birds and lizards and all kinds of things. Of course, the main problem here is the insemination, the breeding. And of course, purebreds is not something that a human being needs. We should, of course, take care of all these animals. They need to be taken care of. And the vegan thing to do is, of course, to adopt and don't shop. Moving on from animals, pets, then to pet food. How should we think when we're feeding our pet animals, or not our, actually? That's the wrong way of expressing things, of course. The animals that we take care of, that we have adopted, how should we feed them? What should we feed them? Well, we should think about that 30% of the animals killed in the world are killed for pet food. So, of course, should we force our dogs to eat vegetables? Should we force our cats to eat vegetables? Well, pet food is, of course, mostly made from waste products. But that's not to say that animals are being killed directly for it also, and also it keeps up the whole system, of course. So it's an extra way of income for that industry. Dogs are very easy. They are omnivores. They have the same kind of gut bacteria that we do, so they can very easily benefit from the same food that we do. And they have been doing so for thousands of years. They have been living off whatever scraps that we have given them. So they're omnivores. They are not like wolves. They do not need to eat other animals. Cats are a bit more difficult, mostly because they are stubborn, very, very stubborn. So changing the diet of a cat is very difficult. There are also some kidney problems and some nutrients that you have to think about there. But there are literally millions of cats living with vegans that are eating vegan food. And of course, when you're from an ethical standpoint here, you can argue that the cat is suffering. If the cat cannot eat salmon, it's suffering. Well, the salmon is suffering also. So to take the victim's perspective and to think about which is the lesser evil, what are you going to do here is, of course, to try as far as possible to not kill anybody for your pet. That would be the ethical thing to do. The nutrients are all there. You can get all the taurine, all the different nutrients that you need in plants, or you can create them. A lot of sanctuaries are now thinking about switching to vegan food for pets also. Moving on to riding then. Riding is one of these things that a lot of us has done in the past. Sitting on an animal or transporting ourselves on an animal is, of course, nothing that we humans need. And of course, it's not only riding. We're using these animals for a lot of different things. One number we often forget is that 16 million horses died in the First World War. When you think about this process of riding a horse, the first thing you do is to break it. Think about that for a second. What are we doing? We're breaking a horse here, right? So we're breaking its will to be free. We're using spurs often. We're using a bridle. And that's, of course, a piece of metal that you put in the mouth of the horse. You often use a whip. You use pressure, of course. You do racing. One thing to think about is, why are we not riding zebras? Didn't the people in Africa think about that you can actually ride a zebra also? No. Well, maybe they did think about that. But the reason we're not riding zebras is because they cannot be broken. They are more stubborn. If you try to ride a zebra, it will bite you, it will kick you, and it will not stop. It will not be broken. That's why we're not riding. So the reason we're able to ride horses is because they're nice. That's the same thing with lots of animals. For example, beagles. Why are we using so many beagles in animal testing? Because they won't bite. They're not using German shepherds for animal testing as much. They're using beagles because they're really, really nice. Even though you sting them and you do all kinds of horrible things to them, they will still be nice to you. So riding is not vegan. No. How about plants then? Ending up here. Do plants have feelings? We get into these arguments all the times, right? Do they have a brain? No, they do not have a brain. They do not have a central nervous system. So yes, you can eat plants. They do not use dopamine internally. They do not react to opioids. You cannot test your drugs on a banana and see if they calm down. No. So if you really want to be ethical, go fruitarian. Sure. You get all the different, if you don't want to eat, you don't want to hurt any trees, then go fruitarian. You don't even have to cut down any trees for that. You'll just pick up the fruit. So that's the end of the ethics section, and I'm about 1 hour, so I'm keeping my time. So do you think this is a good idea? Is this a good idea how we're treating the animals? That's the question that I want you to put to yourself and, of course, everybody that you're arguing with. And my answer is no, it's not a good idea, and we should stop it right away. That's the end of my hour. Thank you very much for listening. And now I am open to questions.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was a very solid and thorough presentation with a lot of useful information.
I will put that in the Facebook event. So I'll put a link to Dropbox where you can download all the slides. So if you want to take parts of it or use it in whatever way you want, it's free.
Awesome. Now let's see if we have some questions from the audience. Say, I think there is a way of raising your hand, or maybe just feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or write in the chat as well if you prefer that. Do we have any questions? In the meantime, maybe I can ask you a question. Or was it someone else? For example, what would you see as because it can be so many different things, but to someone that is very stubborn, for example, it happened in this week at my job where someone told me, like, when I think about food, I think about if I'm gonna eat fish, pig, or cow, you know, or fish or meat or chicken, maybe he said even. Do you have any like good starters there, just to like, if someone is like completely lost in their own normal behavior, so to say?
Well, two things. I mean, so well, the very nice thing that you could do is, of course, to show them the wonderful food that you're eating, and that's always the most socially acceptable way of doing it. How about we go this, and I'll show you some nice stuff, and there are lots of places in Stockholm. And then, of course, you can point out the fact that if you're looking for tastes, all spices are in fact vegan. Chili, pepper, salt, fat, sugar, they're all vegan. So we can produce any kind of taste with vegan flavorings. The thing that is a bit more difficult is consistency, but we're getting much better at that by the day. So for example, oomph or some other product like that has the perfect consistency if you want something chewy and meaty. If that's what you're used to, you can eat just the same kind of things. And all those new burgers, the Impossible Burger, those kind of things, they are extremely meaty. So if you're really looking not to change, but you realize that this is totally wrong, then just don't change your habits, just change the ingredients, and don't kill anybody. You can still think about food in the same way. You can still eat all the specialties that you're used to.
That's a good question. But basically the taste is you can enjoy it without being causing suffering, I guess.
Exactly, yeah. There are lots of good reasons to go plant-based, whole food, and all of that too, of course. But from an ethical standpoint, I mean, you don't have to kill anybody to that's the bottom line.
Okay, we have a question here also from Hannah. You said that 28 hours transport are allowed in the EU.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Isn't it 8 hours?
8 hours is within Sweden, and 28 hours when you cross borders. 8 hours within Sweden is the rule, as far as I know.
Okay. Good question, and
yeah.
Any more questions?
Of course, 8 hours is. I mean, 1 hour is too much. 8 hours is horribly too much. 28 hours is unimaginable.
I have a question.
Yes,
Yeah. Hey. So first, thanks for the awesome presentation.
Thank you.
So most of us that are vegan, myself included, we didn't become vegan overnight. You know, we took sort of like baby steps. So like I used to eat meat, I became vegetarian, and then I eventually became vegan.
Yeah.
And what I found, like in my own experience today, like if I was, when I try to advocate veganism from an ethical standpoint, I find it difficult to reconcile advocating transitions from, let's say, like I would never tell somebody to become a vegetarian before becoming a vegan, because even though that's what I did, but I feel that there's an ethical conflict, because I am in some ways endorsing the usage of animals. In this case, it would be dairy, which, I mean, now I know is much more cruel than meat itself, in my opinion, at least. And so like my question is, like, on one side, you know, if you look at the ethical argument, it seems like it's black and white. You're either using animals or you're not using animals, right? And if you're to ask somebody to adopt the ethical position that requires them to stop using animals entirely, which is what we want, but that could scare people off because it's too much of a transition, too much of a jump in one step. And part of me sometimes feels that it'd be more effective if people could take these baby steps, just like I did. But how do you advocate for, like, how do you is it possible to advocate transitioning to vegan without compromising on the ethical position that you talked about earlier?
I think so. I did the same thing as you did. I went vegetarian first, and I wish somebody would have been more clear with me. Gary Yourofsky is my idol, and I'm sure you've heard him also. And he's very straightforward, and he's the one that made me first go vegetarian, even though he definitely does not promote vegetarianism. But I think we should dare to be extreme, dare to be radical, because if you sow the seed of this is totally wrong, then you get the maybe this is a bit wrong. And you're always, you know, rationalizing your own behavior. When I was vegetarian, I rationalized that behavior, that this dairy could potentially be done ethically. I kind of argued with myself, or you know, lied to myself, essentially. So I think we should dare to be extreme there and say, no, just go all the way. You're not a baby. You don't need to take baby steps. And if we put ourselves out there, then we're pulling them in the right direction. So yes, they will say that you're extreme, but they will say that you're extreme if you're telling them to go vegetarian also. I mean, yeah. So sowing the seed and trying to push them as far away as possible from carnism. That's what my idea with. But I know it's very, very difficult. And yeah, if you think about it as a religion, that you're not going to convince anybody right away to go atheist or to go, you know, leave their religion, then it becomes much easier, and it's much less on you. Because that's how I always feel, that if I could just do this presentation slightly better, then everybody would just go vegan right away, right? But no, I can't, because most people will not even listen to it, and even those that do will rationalize afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, good question. I think we all can relate to that a bit.
Oh yeah.
How far to go with our outreach or just talking. We have some comment from Mayo, who just, it's not really a question, she just wants to say that, oh, well, it was to everyone. So yeah, in general, Taiwanese people, I think it's wrong to eat dogs and cats, but globally, maybe they are considered as eating dogs. Maybe they are part of our Asian category. Aha, okay, in his map. Okay. Thank you.
On my map, okay.
So in your map, it was highlighted as eating dogs, but they have banned it, and they have apparently are against. I mean, they have an opinion.
So there was something wrong in my map. That was the point, right?
Yes.
Duly noted. I'll recheck that. Good. Yeah, I'm hoping that there are more and more countries that ban animal eating or dog eating, of course. And yes, there are more and more countries that are banning it now. And especially in light of Corona, of course, which is an animal industry-driven disease, a pandemic. And then, of course, a lot of companies are at least a little bit starting to think about this. China is starting to think about closing down the wet markets. But they haven't done it yet, but I hope they will.
Yes, okay. Well, Beata wonders where we can find the recording, and that we will either put directly on Facebook or the link to a YouTube link to find it. So we will try to post it in our event or on our Facebook page. So keep updated on Facebook, because that's where we met to come here. Any more questions from the audience?
Yes. Hi, do you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I missed the first part of the presentation.
Okay, I'll do it all over again then for you, Nico.
Thank you so much, Peter. First of all, yeah, thanks for taking the time and giving this great presentation. But I wanted to ask about animal experimentation. What is, I think that is for me the biggest problem. The other industries are easy. And of course, ethically, the animal experimentation is also easy, but there are a lot who say that it's more ethical to test on animals who arguably have lower sentience so that it can benefit humans.
Yeah.
And I know that most of the drugs and most of the experiments are junk, but there are like 10% of the experiments who actually benefit humanity. So what about that?
Yeah, and that is a difficult one. I agree. That's a difficult one to argue, and I'm sure you've, what's his name now? There was a debate called Take Animals Off Our Plates. Woolen. Philip Woolen is the word I'm looking for. I'm getting to that. So there was a debate in Oxford where Philip Woolen actually lost an argument on animal testing. There is a debate where he talks about eating animals, and that one he wins easily. And I'm sure if you haven't heard Philip Woolen speak, you should definitely listen to him. He's really, really good. But yes, it is a very difficult thing because you're directly pitting human suffering against animal suffering, which and the argument is poised as if you have to choose the animal or choose the human. So that's a hard argument to make if it's that pointed. But what we should always look for is that most of the time it's not. It's like, yeah, if you end up on an island with just a pig, what are you going to eat? Well, I'm not on an island with a pig. And what is the pig eating anyway and all that? So it's not a realistic scenario really that when we're talking about it. But yes, it is a difficult scenario. It's a difficult discussion to take. Sorry, I don't have a better answer than that.
No, I don't think somebody has. Like, there is a debate or there is a project called For Life on Earth in England where they say, okay, let's put all the studies public reviewed that have been experimented on animals, but it's very difficult. That's why I usually ask the difficult ones. Sorry. So.
Yeah, I wish I had I wish there was a better answer, but I don't really have one.
Yes, that's a very interesting area, and I guess a lot of dilemma as well that some people could say now that with COVID and stuff. But of course, if you take the victim's perspective, I guess it makes it easier. We have a question here from Mila. Basically, I mean, she says, what do I say? First of all, thank you for the information. She said, what do I say to the people who are saying that they don't care about animal environment or health or anything else, and they just want to eat animals, which we actually do find ourselves hearing people say sometimes. So it's not.
Well, if they don't care about anything at all, then of course any argument falls. So what do you care? Do you care about, if you don't care about your own health, do you care about your children's health? Do you care about your spouse's or your partner's health? Or what do you care about? So that would be the first argument. We turn that around, because most people, all people care about something. I mean, otherwise they would be high on cocaine or heroin or something. I don't know what they would be doing, just being hedonistic every day. So they probably care about something. So I think the person that's saying, I don't care about health or environment or animals or anything, they are lying. They're just saying that to try to win the argument. So what do you care about then? That would be my answer.
Yeah, it's a good way of approaching that. Like,
yeah, you can't. I mean, you can't build if you have no moral foundation to build on. You can't build an argument on top of nothing. So if you don't care about anything, then yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yes, I think there's an interesting book about that as well. If nothing matters. What's his name? Jonathan Safran. Okay, I thought it was someone else. Which is also a great, let's say, what should we call it? Philosophical, moral, talker, thinker. Yeah, great mind. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff written about this. I mean, there's a list somewhere. I have it in one of my slides here with like 127, I think, vegan documentaries. There's so many people speaking, eloquently about this. There's so much written, and that there's no counter argument.
Yes.
I mean, after having argued about veganism for 7 years, I tend to get rather tired from the other side, because there are no good arguments. There are just bad excuses. And I mean, I've been talking to people that are professors from agricultural universities, and they have nothing. I'm not a professor of any agriculture or anything. I shouldn't be able to stomp their arguments. If I got into any other area, if I got into music and started, discussing that, talking about music, I don't know anything about music, so they should stomp me right away. So you don't know your history, you don't know anything. But there's nothing. And any other science or practice that we're doing, there's no argument for it, and that's one of the most frustrating things.
Yeah.
And that also helps, of course. There are 4,500 religions in the world. Most of them are probably wrong, not the ones that you personally believe in, of course, but all the other ones are wrong. So if you think that carnism is one of the other religions, it's like, doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, that can be a great, also speaking of argumentation, really asking what is the pro, what is the reason for it, just to turn it around, because I feel many times we get...
I'm vegan, why aren't you? That's a good way to try to push it around.
Exactly.
And that's also sowing the seeds. What is your reason for eating animals? Did you really think this through? Did you think through all the options? And yes, corpses, that's what I'm going to eat.
Exactly, just to turn it around so that we are not to have to defend ourselves.
Exactly.
I see that you have raised your hand. If you want to ask a question, there is a button to raise your hand here virtually, and I see that Junal has done that. So please, Junal.
So I have a question that has to do, again, this is all from like the ethical position, right?
That's what we're talking about today.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on, I mean, clearly we shouldn't go out and buy like leather. But what are your thoughts when it comes to, if you're an ethical vegan, or you consider yourself, to be an ethical vegan, to continue to use leather items that you already have? And secondly, purchasing second-hand leather items.
Yeah. Well, for me, it kind of becomes a symbol. I mean, if I'm wearing leather, then I'm kind of, you know, waving the flag about, and I'm showing that this is okay, this is acceptable behavior. So I've tried to minimize. I mean, I've been a vegan for 7 years now. I've not purchased anything more, but I just changed my car. So now my car doesn't have a leather steering wheel. Last time I bought a car, and there was no car without leather steering wheels. So now finally there is. So yes, I did pay for that car 3 years ago with a leather steering wheel. I really looked about and tried to find one. But we are in a society where it's very, very difficult to avoid those kind of things. But I would, so you're not actively doing something wrong by purchasing secondhand or by using what you already have. Well, secondhand, you could definitely say that you're keeping somebody's making money from that leather product still. But by reusing what you already pay, you're not actively doing anything. But waving the flag and showing the symbol of leather, that's the reason that I would avoid it.
Thanks.
You're welcome. But I would never, you know, argue. If I saw you on the street, I knew you were vegan, and I saw you had leather shoes, I would never question your shoes. No, why haven't you? I would never say that you're doing something wrong there. And so I wouldn't argue with that action at all. If I saw you buying new shoes, I would probably say that, you know, there are better alternatives out there.
Right. Sorry, I can't figure out how to unraise my hand or lower my hand.
No worries. Maybe I can do it for you. Okay, now. Yes, one question? Yeah.
Hello, thank you very much for the presentation. So I'm just wondering, what are your favorite forms of activism?
This is the one. This is my favorite kind of activism. So I'm very grateful to you, everybody here who listened to me and who arranged this. So this is what I like to do the most. And I've been a teacher for 30 years, and I like, you know, I like to prepare a good, you know, speech and give it, and have people's reaction to it. I mostly like being in the same room, so I wish I was there with you now, that we're all together, but that's difficult now, of course. And so this is my favorite type of activism. I'm not sure if it's the most effective one. I see some people doing wonderful things with videos, so I'm kind of thinking about starting to do that. But there are so many others that are doing it better than me, so I don't know. But this is the one I like the most. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. And we have had you physically, let's say, once, and it was a very, very good.
Thank you. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. It's such an, you know, I like doing it for non-vegans also. I guess most people are vegan, and I like doing it with non-vegans also. But with that group that we were last time with Animal Rebellion, it was a very positive attitude. So we were laughing at the counter arguments. So we had a lot of fun. Yes. While we were talking about horrible things, we were talking about environmental problems and all kinds of issues, but we still had a really good time. So I really enjoyed that part of activism also, of course, meeting other people that care, because that's the most difficult thing when you're starting, your eyes are open and you start seeing that the world, there's so much horrible things happening in the world. So you want to be sometimes with people who are aware of that fact and are not denying it.
Yes, absolutely. We have officially said until 7 in this event. For me, if someone wants to ask another question, it's absolutely no problem. Before people start dropping out, I just want to once again thank you, Peter Kalmström, and I hope that people will find your, for example, go to your bloggen, and follow you on the internet if you can physically. Yeah. And also the us that hosted today was Active Vegans Sweden, together with Animal Rebellion, and we are both based here in Stockholm mostly, but it can be found in all over Sweden and all over the world. Yes, if there's any more question, otherwise people are free to leave without feeling that that they are escaping.
All right, thank you everybody.
Thank you.